Thank you for that. Thank you for that offering. God, please look down and see us through. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Oh God, you are our rock and redeemer. Look down on us and see us through. Good morning. This morning, before I get started, I have a couple of shameless plugs, so bear with me, a few brief announcements. On September 13th, it's a Wednesday at 7, we are doing a session called Ask Reverend Mia. Okay, we did it a couple times last spring, but we're bringing it back this fall. And I wanted to share how important it is for us to have conversation. Discipleship is deepened outside of the sermon moment. Jesus' interaction with his disciples was not merely lecture-based. What that means is the sermon is a limited genre. It is lecture. It is very much coming from here and going out there. But I would like to be in conversation with you. I want to hear your questions. And I want to hear your concerns. And so I invite you to ask Reverend Mia on September 13th at 7 p.m. in person and online. And I want to share with you that we are beginning a sermon series starting next Sunday. It is entitled, What's Worship Got to Do with It? What's worship got to do with it? Okay? What's worship got to do with it? And it's 5 weeks, and we'll be walking through various elements of the worship experience, why we do what we do, how we do it, who started it, do we have to keep it, can we throw it away? All those things you have questions about, baptism and communion and preaching and sharing. We invite you to take that journey with us as we go deeper into discipleship this fall. If you will meet me this morning for our scripture in Isaiah 43. We are starting at verse 18. And I am reading in the New Revised Standard Version. It says, "Do not remember the former things, or consider the things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild animals will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches will, for I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert to give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself so that they might declare my praise." I want to read that again in the New International Version. It says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell in the past. See, I am doing a new thing." Somebody say new thing. New thing. "Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. The wild animals honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I provide water in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland to give drink to my people, my chosen, the people I formed for myself, that they may proclaim my praise." In other words, it also might sound a little bit like this. Between I hold your future. Who could know these things but me? And God says, don't fear. I will be your song. Sing The writer of this text is reflecting on our God, our help in ages past. That's a great hymn by the writer Isaac Watts. He is reflecting on the memories of God as he moves through Isaiah. When I think about this passage, I think about improvisation and how so much of improvisation requires memory. I was at the Jazz Fest yesterday across the street. Some good stuff happening over there. I was at the Jazz Fest yesterday, and I was so intrigued. I love the point in the set when the trio, they break apart and one person starts doing their improvisation and everybody else is sort of keeping the beat, right? They're keeping the melodic line going, they're keeping the melody going, but there's this one person who's riffing and running and you don't know quite where they're going. It's very confusing at times for some people. Dominic, am I right? Absolutely. And a good musician knows where they're going to land, but everybody else is still uncertain as they are moving their way through the riffs and the runs. I am so intrigued by that. I'm so fascinated by how their partners in the trio or the quartet or the band trust them so much that even when they are out in the wilderness riffing and running and moving their way around the melodic line, there is still a knowingness. In the church that I grew up in, the elders used to say, when you know that you know that you know. There was a knowingness. There is a knowingness in jazz because you have rehearsed, hopefully. You have rehearsed with your band. You have rehearsed with your trio. You have memory of the last time you all did your improv. You have memory of how you were uncertain about how it would end up, but it kept going and going until it landed. And then everybody jumps back in. I was so intrigued by this performance yesterday, so intrigued by how the people were just going off, and I love listening to Coltrane and some of the greatest. I love their improvisational ingenuity. It reminds me of God in many ways. There are seasons of our lives when we find ourselves in wilderness places and we are uncertain about the improvisational methods of God. We find ourselves uncomfortable because we like control. We like to know everything. We want to know what's going to happen. In jazz, you can't be a control freak. You have to trust your partner so much. Trust that they are going to lead you back around to the melody, back to the place where it lands, where it makes sense, where you can all come back together again. And that knowingness, that trust, that faith is because you have recollection. You have memory. This passage of Isaiah is calling on the people's memory. If you will allow me today, I just want to teach just a little bit. There are 3 Isaiahs. Oh, y'all got quiet. Oh, see, this is what happens. There are 3 sections of Isaiah, and it is very likely that they were written by 3 different people. So there is 1st Isaiah, that is chapters 1 through 39. There is 2nd Isaiah, that is chapters 40 through 55. And then there is 3rd Isaiah, that's 56 through 66. So we are in 2nd Isaiah today, and each Isaiah has a unique call. They have a unique assignment. This Isaiah's assignment, 2nd Isaiah, his assignment is to address a discouraged people who have heard many false hopes from false prophets. The people had been in and out of exile over and over again, in and out of captivity over and over again. They had been under the leaders like Caesars and emperors who did not care about their future well-being, and they had been sold false hopes. And 2nd Isaiah is called by God to lead these people out of a place of discouragement, out of a place of desolation, out of a place of depression and despair, and to lead them toward a future hope. A hope. Professor David Carr, who is a Hebrew Bible scholar, he reminds us that the first 8 chapters of 2nd Isaiah, that will be chapters 40 through 48, the first half of 2nd Isaiah concludes with an argument that only works if it is directly addressed to the exiles, people who find themselves lost in the wilderness, people who are trying to find their way back home, and they keep coming to stumbling blocks. They keep coming to walls, and while they are out in the wilderness, they are hungry and they are thirsty, they are starving, their children are getting sick, their bodies are weighing down. This was 2nd Isaiah's call. This is why the text insinuates that he ran from his call when he was called. It was hard work for 2nd Isaiah. It was dirty work to follow behind all that 1st Isaiah had laid out. When I was preaching about Paul a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how Paul had students, and that some of the Pauline epistles are actually not written by Paul. They were written by his students. It's almost like Paul was a school of thought, and he had students that would continue his line of thought, his line of thinking, the same way that Isaiah and many of the major prophets existed. They had students who would continue their work, continue trying to push forth hope in a world full of hopelessness, trying to push forth help in a world full of helplessness, trying to bring sorrow, joy in the midst of sorrow. This was 2nd Isaiah's task. And most times, particularly in the major prophets, the prophets go through a cycle. Usually they start off with comfort, and then they transition to assurance. Then they might offer a little lesson. Then they might make a few church announcements. And then they talk a little bit about a hymn of praise, praising God. Often after that, they reprimand the folks. They talk about the folks' disobedience, and then they bring it back around to a promise of restoration. This is where we find 2nd Isaiah today in the 43rd chapter. He is trying to bring it back around to a promise of restoration, a promise of redemption. The people have found themselves in another wasteland. Now, this could be a figurative wasteland or a literal wasteland, and I struggle using the term wasteland because in my theology, nothing is wasted in God. That God can take anything and turn it around. God can use anybody, any place, anytime, anywhere, that nothing is wasted. So perhaps the correct language that comes against barrenness and wasteland might be a fruitful opportunity for God, a possible land for God to do a new thing in. The people have found themselves in a dry place. They have found themselves in a place of desperation. And the author of 2nd Isaiah understands that his traumatized audience that has been sold lies and false hopes by false prophets, they need a word that will bring forth hope. In the midst of the desert, in the midst of the wilderness, in the midst of the thirsty seasons, in the midst of the hungry seasons, the prophet focuses on the forthcoming restoration by recounting the theophanic moments of God. Theophanic means God appearances. He recounts the God appearances so that the people might find hope for a future. In verse 4, Isaiah talks about a God who has exchanged other nations for Israel, saving them. In verses 16 and 17, he talks about a God who makes a way in the sea and brought mighty waters through a path. Basically, he is reflecting on the Exodus narrative here. You see that he is trying to condition the people's memory. Don't you remember the God of our ancestors? When Pharaoh was coming behind them with horses and chariots and God parted the sea, don't you remember? When our backs were against the wall in the wilderness and we had no water, God brought water from a rock, don't you remember? When your blood sugar was low, the psalmist tells us in Psalm 81 that God brought forth honey out of a rock, don't you remember? He is trying to cultivate a memory for the moments in their lives when they feel weak, when they feel uncertain, when they feel unsure, it is because they have memory that they are supposed to have hope. I think today often about memory care. I think about those among us whose memories are fading. And this is why community is important, because they are not recalling individual memories. They are recalling collective memories, communal memories. When my memory fades, I hope that there are some people around me who can call on the memory for me. The communal memory of God's salvation and the communal memory of God's liberation. They're not telling personal stories. They're telling stories of their grandparents and their great-grandparents and their great-great-great-grandparents. They are witnesses. They are storytellers. They are calling forth memory to find hope in a seemingly hopeless world. Recollection of events of the past was a common tool of the prophets and even the authors in the Psalms. But something troubled me about this text today. I was troubled because we get to verse 18, and the writer says, "Do not remember the former things." Do not remember the former things. Now, I said, wait a minute, Isaiah. Wait a minute, you just spent all this time cultivating our memory. From chapter 40 to chapter 41 to chapter 42, and now in chapter 43, you have spent all this time recounting our God, our help in ages past. Now you're telling me to forget? To forget the former things? What is he talking about here? I was reading the complete Jewish Bible, and their translation said, "Stop dwelling on past events and brooding over times gone by." Or the Message Bible, I love the way Eugene Peterson puts it, "Forget about what's happened. Don't keep going over history." I had problems with this text at first because I said, why is he asking me to abandon my memory in a time when I need my memory the most? But perhaps Isaiah is saying through the voice of God, perhaps he is saying, don't get caught up. You can remember, but don't get caught up. Don't get stuck in the mud of old history, cementing yourself there, trying to build a life there, trying to build monuments there. I don't want you to be so focused on building monuments to former things that you are not open to the creative construction of the unexpected in the universe. The unexpected liberation and the unexpected protection, the unexpected provision and salvation. We can become so consumed with the events of yesteryear. You ever had a friend, maybe from high school or some of y'all college? I mean, some of us are younger and older than others, amen. But if you ever had a friend and they keep reliving their college days, like the glory days. Oh, remember when we were doing this and we were in the student center? And you're like, man, that was 20 years ago, man. Like, what have you lived since then? What else is going on in your life? And sometimes those moments are so fun. We sit down and we laugh and we cry and we make jokes about the things that happened 20, 30, 40, and 50 years ago. But if we get stuck there, to the point where we can't live our lives, to the point where we can't be open to the unexpected move of God, to the improvisational ingenuity of God, that can become problematic. The prophet is saying, forget the past. Don't hold on to it so much. And I hear some people saying, so you just want us to throw it all away? Well, no. The past is a tool for preserving hope, but we can't get so caught up in the glory days, so focused on moving backwards that we miss the magnificent moments that are at our fingertips. This is why I often struggle when I see certain preachers and self-appointed prophets and televangelists. They love recreating things. They are more into imitation than creation. This is why we see some people making a farce of the Gospels. They are trying to walk on water like Jesus and trying to make the blind see by wiping spit on people's eyes like Jesus. God did not call us to imitation. God calls us to ingenuity. And it's not so much that the miracles of the past aren't important and that they don't make sense in the grand scheme of the story, but God is doing a new thing. They are new miracles that have your name on it, that use a special kind of uniqueness that only you possess. New miracles that have your fingers wrapped in them, that are just waiting for you to step into your authenticity to enact them so that we can transform the conditions of our world. God is doing a new thing. God is doing a new thing. God is saying, I know that I parted the Red Sea, and I could do it again, and I might do it again, but if I don't do it again, I want you to know that I don't want you to miss the river that I'm making in the desert because you are standing at the seashore. I'm doing a new thing. I know that when you were hungry, I dropped some breadcrumbs and some quail and some chicken wings from the sky before. It's not that I can't do it again, and it's not that I won't do it again, but don't be so busy staring at the sky when your provision might be in the soil. I am doing a new thing. My creative prowess is so wide and so vast, so unfathomably innovative that I don't have to make the same miracle twice. God ain't got to do the same thing twice. That's how big and how wide and how capable God is for us. I imagine God being a jazz artist, and that the improvisational skills are so deep that God is just letting us know, I just want you to wait for me to land, and so you can jump back into the tune. Give me a moment to riff and run here or there. You might not understand where I'm going. You might not understand all of the nitty-gritty, all of the bits and pieces of the ways that I am maneuvering through this universe, but if you could just trust, we have been here before. God is saying, we have rehearsed, amen. God is saying, we have had a jam session before. You know how I do. But just because you know how I do it doesn't mean I'm going to do the same thing again. So be patient with me. I am the God who has made ways in the wilderness so that you could walk through. I am the God who has made rivers in the desert. I am the God who has provided, and that hope for tomorrow is not only rooted in your memory, but it is rooted in your capacity to give yourselves over to creation. We are reminded that in Genesis, God ordained us to be co-creators with her, made in their image and likeness. So I know some of you are sitting here today and you're saying, well, Pastor Mia, I'm not creative. I'm an accountant. I'm a lawyer. I'm a business person. I'm not creative. I would beg to differ, because if you woke up this morning and put makeup on, you're creative. If you cooked breakfast, you are creative. If you put an outfit together, no matter how raggedy somebody may think it is, you are creative, because God made us in God's image, ordaining us to the ministry of co-creativity so that we can keep doing new things in a world that is ever evolving. Perhaps God don't want us to try to recreate stuff of the past, because that was 2,000 plus years ago. And the world has changed. And God is needing us, these 21st century beings, to do a new thing and to move forward into our improvisational ingenuity. And could we be ready for that? Could we be ready for that? In a world that has created blueprints, could we be ready for that? In a world that has tried to box us in, a world that has told us that we can only do one thing because we're not good enough for the other things, a world that has said that our capacity is limited, What God is requiring of us demands us to step out of those preconceived notions regarding our capacity as creative human beings. Could we move forward with God to do new things? Friends, what I've been learning over the past couple of months as we've been doing morning mindfulness is that faith is a delicate practice of remembering and forgetting. It is a practice. Faith is a practice. We have to work at it. We have to rehearse. We have to get together. And it is best practice often in community. But it is a practice where we have to learn the delicate balance of remembering for the sake of hope and forgetting for the sake of ingenuity and transformation. That is our call. It is a practice of constantly moving forward and not negating the past. We can still look back. I love the songs that call forth a look backness. I love in church when they used to say, when I think about the goodness of Jesus. I love that moment of recollection that keeps us and sustains us. Nostalgia is a wonderful tool, but if we get stuck there, transformation is limited. And so our charge today, as we begin a new season together, as we begin a new moment together in the life of our church, in the school year for many of you, in the life of the world, is to move forward into the uncertainty of improvisation, to move forward into the uncertainty of ingenuity, to move forward into our ordained reality as co-creators with the divine. And why is that important? Because God is doing a new thing in our lives and in the world. And it requires our improvisational ingenuity and our authenticity and our radical integrity for the sake of the least of these. So will you make that commitment with me today as we move forward together? The song says, God makes all things new. And we may not be able to see it when we are in the midst of the riffing and the running, but we have to trust that it's gonna come back around and it's gonna land like a wonderful jazz composition. It's gonna land. That all things are working together for the good. God is doing a new thing. Lauren, will you join me? In this moment of reflection, I dare you to tap into the part of yourself that is calling forth creativity out of you in this world. Whatever that looks like for you, it is different, it is unique. But that sign is one of my favorites. It says, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that God is waiting for you to step into it. Come on, join us and sing.
All things new.
You make all things new.
Will follow you forward. It goes again. You make all things new. Say you make all things new, and you make all things new. And I will follow you. I will follow you forward. We go.
God is calling us forward. Come on, say you make.
Yeah. You make all things new, and you make all things new, and I will follow you forward. I'm not looking back, I'm moving ahead. I'm here to declare in you, my past is over. In you, all things are made new. Surrendered my life to Christ. I'm moving forward.